All right, let's just jump right into this. What was supposed to be a historic agreement, a real handshake moment between two of the world's biggest economic powers, has just completely fallen apart. We are talking about a massive international conflict that basically erupted in a matter of days, and it's putting a trillion-dollar relationship right on the brink of collapse.
And this quote right here is exactly why this is so serious. The European Union's top trade official, Bernd Lange, he put it in the most stark terms you can imagine. This isn't just about tariffs or goods anymore. I mean, when you hear politicians start using words like sovereignty and territorial integrity, you know we've shot way past a simple business dispute.
So, what on earth just happened? Well, on Wednesday, January 21st, 2026, the European Union's legislative body pretty much slammed on the emergency brake. They brought what was supposed to be a foundational trade deal with the United States to a screeching halt.
And the language they're using here, it's incredibly final. This isn't just some pause or a delay for more talks. The EU has suspended all work. They've made it crystal clear that the ball is now in Washington's court, basically saying this whole thing stays frozen until the U.S. chooses, and this is a direct quote, cooperation rather than confrontation. Now, to really get why this is such a dramatic U-turn, we have to rewind just a little bit, back to the deal that is now collapsing. It was called the Turnberry Deal, and believe me, it was supposed to kick off a whole new era of stability.
The whole point of this deal, which they reached back in July of 2025, was that it was designed to be a win-win. It's pretty straightforward. The U.S. would get lower EU tariffs on really important stuff like agricultural and industrial goods, giving American companies way easier access to that huge 27-country market. In return, the EU would lock in a cap on U.S. tariffs at just 15% and even see tariffs on things like generic pharmaceuticals wiped out completely. The goal for everyone was just predictability.
And the stakes here are just colossal. We are talking about a $1.5 trillion annual partnership. That's trillion with a T. This isn't some rounding error. It is one of the most important economic relationships on the entire planet. Billions of dollars in goods and services flow between these two blocks every single day.
So, what could possibly be so important that it would jeopardize a $1.5 trillion relationship? Well, believe it or not, the answer is Greenland. This is the exact pivot point where all that cooperation just shattered into conflict.
So how exactly did we get from that big, celebratory handshake in Scotland to a full-blown international crisis over Greenland in what feels like the blink of an eye? This timeline really shows you just how fast everything came crashing down. In July 2025, the deal is announced, everyone's praising it, then boom. Saturday, January 17th, President Trump threatens to hit 7 EU countries and the UK with tariffs unless the US gets to control Greenland. Just 4 days later, on January 21st, the EU halts the entire deal. It's just a stunningly rapid collapse.
And Europe's response wasn't just fast, it was unified and incredibly firm. This wasn't some threat they were willing to negotiate over or, just ignore. They saw it as a fundamental, deal-breaking breach of trust.
The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she really captured the feeling perfectly at the World Economic Forum. Her point was simple. That handshake at Turnberry was supposed to mean something, and in her view, the U.S. tariff threat just tore up that promise and turned what was a partnership into a confrontation. And right here, this is the fundamental disconnect. On one side, you have the U.S. position which says, hey, no military force will be used, but that 10% tariff threat, that stays on the table. But for the EU, that economic threat is the whole problem. They see it as a new quality of relation that's based on pressure, and they've said as long as that threat exists, there is, and I quote, no possibility for compromise.
And that brings us to what happens next. And honestly, this is where it gets a little scary. The EU is now openly talking about retaliatory measures, and they are weighing whether to unleash something they literally nicknamed the trade bazooka.
So what is this thing? Well, officially, it's called the Anti-Coercion Instrument, or ACI. It's this incredibly powerful policy tool that was actually designed to counter economic pressure from countries like China. But here's the kicker, the really crucial detail. It has never, ever been used before.
And its powers are absolutely sweeping. We're not just talking about counter tariffs. The EU could literally block U.S. investments, lift intellectual property protections. Think about that, just suspending patents and copyrights for American companies. They could revoke business licenses and even outright ban U.S. goods and services from the entire Eurozone. It's the nuclear option, and now the EU's own trade chairman says he's in favor of using it. And even if they don't fire the bazooka, the EU is already preparing a more, let's call it conventional, but still massive response. They're putting together a separate package of tariffs worth nearly $110 billion, and they're aiming it right at iconic American exports. We're talking about Boeing airplanes, soybeans, and even Kentucky bourbon.
Which leaves us all with this final, critical question. That handshake at Turnberry represented a clear path towards a stable trade deal. But this threat over Greenland has put both sides squarely on the path towards a trade war. The choice of which path to follow? Well, right now, it's resting on a razor's edge.